I wrote my thesis there.
Now, given that sort of revolutionary context, and given that you'd already had the pastoral interlude in Nova Scotia, it does seem a very strange choice to go for Dickens, an extremely conservative and antiquated choice. I mean, this is the birth of theory as well, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, at this point, the structuralists were very much in vogue. You know, at the American universities, a visit to Paris was de rigueur, and I mean, people would come back. You know that they
armed with Foucault.
They had sat in on Barthes and Foucault and various things. So this was happening. It was really at the beginning of that period. I myself, at that time, was very interested in Russian formalism.
Shklovsky and
Jakobson, Tynyanov. And I chose Dickens because I was interested in seeing whether or not Russian formalist theory could be applied to something like, I mean, I worked on the Pickwick Papers of all things. I didn't even choose one of the novels of the 40s with a lot of progressive content and so on. I chose the Pickwick Papers that was a very, very odd 18th century kind of book in the 19th century. And essentially applied Russian formalist critical techniques to the Pickwick Papers. That's what my dissertation was about.
What, defamiliarization and
all of that?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we were talking about this briefly in the yard. It does strike me that Dickens is an extremely Guyanese novelist. He seems to have visited here and caught the types. I mean, you're suffering under, you know, the experience of Parliament, and as you know, he was a scribe and so on. But one of the passages in your thesis is about this wonderful episode towards the very end of the Pickwick Papers, where the Eatanswill Gazette. Eatanswill is the town that has the political campaign. And the editors, the rival editors of the Eatanswill Independent and the Eatanswill Gazette meet in a hotel foyer, and they pick up their rival's newspaper.
Read at each other.
And they read at each other. And they laugh at the headlines. They read it and they say, bunk, swine, and this. And as thinking back on that passage, I thought how, you know, here we are, and this is the former editor of Starbuck News, used to live here, and across the road is the Guyana Times. And it's like Guyana forces these juxtapositions on you. You read Dickens, you go to Parliament, and I don't know, I think I've disconnected there. And you keep seeing these types again and again. Now, isn't it strange that, given that resonance, almost nobody in a Guyanese school is reading Dickens or taking him on seriously? I mean, the pursuit of serious literature seems to have vanished almost entirely, not just from Guyana, you at the Bocas Lit Fest, but from the entire Caribbean. And there's all this embattled discourse over the canon. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's been long in coming. I mean, I taught at the University of Guyana. I taught in the English department for a number of years. And I remember being very, very discouraged year after year that the people who were coming were less and less equipped every year to do anything. And you were there attempting to teach Jane Austen and Wilson Harris to people who could barely write a paragraph. In fact, I talked a little bit about that in the book. And essentially, a lot of these people you knew were going to end up in classrooms teaching literature to people. And you really were in, I mean, it was what I call the very dynamics of collapse that you were facing. And I think what we're seeing now is really, you know, the process at a very developed stage, where there's less and less reading that is happening, less and less serious reading. And you know, I'm full of admiration for these children who are getting all these multiple subjects at their examinations. But how anyone studies for 12 subjects at an examination?
Yeah, it's beyond imagining.
Never really understood. But I think for some time we've been in a real collapse of standards, a collapse in relation to literacy and in terms of reading. We went through a long period, as you know, when we had no bookshops. Now we have Mr. Austen, which is a great thing. But for long periods, there were really no bookshops available, no books were available. Some of us who would be lucky enough to travel would visit bookshops and bring books in. People coming to visit us would bring books in.
Yes.
But, for a very long time we were in a desert. And I think we're beginning to see the effects of all of that now.
Absolutely.
It's not just that they're not reading Dickens, they're not reading anything.
Well, I wanted to put to you an idea that came out in a gay and lesbian bookstore in Canada, in Vancouver, was trying to import sadomasochistic pornography. It doesn't. There was a big. There was a big trial, and during the trial they brought in some of the authors of this, and they were brilliant people. And one of them produced a remark which I found very haunting. She said that the greatest form of censorship in a developed country, but that would apply equally well here, is illiteracy. Because when a population, an entire population, is no longer capable of dealing with its patrimony, you have effectively censored it. And reading your piece on reading habits in Guyana and so on, I think you're absolutely right. No one in this room faces that threat. This is the Georgetown elite. They can all get books. But beyond them is a society that is becoming more and more remote. What are your thoughts on that, and what role does a critic, especially one who publishes in newspapers and so on, have to play in that environment?
I remember years ago, Miles may not remember this, but I was discussing some of this with him once, many years ago, and talking about the encroaching illiteracy, and he once said to me, he was not perhaps at his most cynical, but close to it, when he said to me that he felt that the policy of the government was about ensuring an electoral majority by keeping people as uneducated as possible. Mm-hmm. I fear that the things that we are discussing and the things that we believe are important, there is very little of it that is happening. I think the university, the school system, what is happening in the classrooms, what passes for teaching, and certainly what's passing for learning, and that university itself, which is, as everyone knows, in agonizing crisis, where you have people teaching at the university, a lot of them with first degrees, mm-hmm. Some a little bit beyond that, but in general the standards at the university are really not what they should be. I think people are taking stock of that now and trying to make some set of arrangements to improve it. I think, for my sins, I sit on the university council and sit on the appointments committee. And increasingly, we are really trying not to hire people other than with a master's or a PhD. Mm-hmm. But of course, paying what we pay, it's very difficult to attract people of any real quality to the university. So we are in a real bind as far as that is concerned. My own view is that the teachers are underpaid, that they, there's this story that has haunted me for many years. I used to have this friend who was a headmistress in Wismar, Christianburg, and she told me one day that she was walking from school, and this student pulled up on this very large, powerful motorbike. And he was not one of her best students. He, in fact, had left school a couple of years before. And he pulled up his motorbike and turned to her and said, "Hey, miss, you still up on this stupidness?" He is discussing school, of course. And increasingly, the young people seem to be caught up in, trying to get as rich as possible, as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And I despair when I think about what is happening at the level of teacher training, what's happening in the classrooms with the teachers, what is motivating them to become teachers. There was a time when, teachers like police were people that you you know, looked at with some awe and respect. These days, there's really none of that in relation to the teaching profession. It's not something that is respected particularly, and to my mind, this is where a lot of the tragedy is. Because until we can deal with what is happening in the schools and what's happening at the university, what's happening in the primary schools in particular, I don't know how we are ever going to be able to cultivate what it is we are discussing, which is a taste for learning, a taste for curiosity, and so on. I don't know where that is to come from.